Hello students, let's read this problem together. Mr. Gonzalez conducted a survey about his students' favorite baseball teams. The circle graph shows the results. A total of 120 students were surveyed, and Mr. Gonzalez concluded that 36 students chose Astros as their favorite baseball team. Which statement about Mr. Gonzalez's conclusion is true? So his conclusion is that there are 36 students that chose Astros. And we're going to see which of the statements that they give us is true about his conclusion. So now let's take a look at what we have. Let's elaborate. So we did use our cube strategy. We circled and underlined important information. In our case, we highlighted the important information. We boxed in our question, and we're going to elaborate. So what I know is that in a circle graph, the total is equal to 100%. What I also know is that the conclusion that Mr. Gonzalez made is about the Astros. So the important part that we're going to focus on from this circle graph is this part right here, the Astros. Now, since we have a percent, we're going to go ahead and use our percent box. Keep in mind that when we make a percent box, we have the part and a total. We also have two types of numbers that we're going to use because we have two ratios in a percent box. The first ratio is just regular numbers that they give us. And the second ratio is a percent because we're going to want to figure out a percent out of 100. With that being said, we already figured out the total, and just in any circle graph, the total in percent is 100. Also, we have a percent for Astros, and that is the part that we are interested in. So that's very important. The part that we want is the part about Astros, because that is the conclusion that they told us Mr. Gonzalez has made. So for Astros, we have a percent in the circle graph of 30%. Now, in the beginning of the question, in front of the question, we have a total of 120 right here. So we know the total is 120, and that is not a percent number, it's just a regular number. So it's going to go right here, 120. And then his conclusion was 36, but we want to know if that is true or not true, and what about it is valid or not. So that's the part that we want to check on. So we're going to see if that actually would be 36. Now, if you want, you could actually put 36 in there, and you could use your cross products to make sure that they are equivalent. Remember, if the cross products are equivalent, then it has a proportional relationship, which would make it true and correct. So here I put an X because I want to know what should the value of students be when we are looking at 30% out of 100%. In other words, what is 30% of 120? So here I'm going to go ahead and set up this proportion. X over 120 is equal to 30 over 100. And I'm going to use my cross products. 120 times 30 is 3,600. And that is equal to X times 100, which is 100X. And now we have a one-step equation. I'm going to go ahead and write it down here because I want to solve my one-step equation. 3,600 is equal to 100X. I want to isolate the X. I want the X to be all by itself. But it is not by itself right now because it has a coefficient of 100. A coefficient means the number that's being multiplied by the X. So the opposite of multiplying is dividing. So if we divide by 100, we will turn that into 1x, and we will isolate it just like we wanted to. But whatever we do to one side in an equation, we have to do it to the other side. We have to keep it balanced. So now I have 3,600 divided by 100. We can divide both of those by 100. And remember, when I'm dividing by 100, those two zeros are going to go away. So same thing, 100 divided by 100 is going to be 1. So we're going to get rid of those two zeros. So 36 divided by 1 is 36. So x equals 36. So do we agree with Mr. Gonzalez? We figured out x equals 36, and we're saying x is the number of students. Okay, so 36 students, and the part that we were looking at was Astros. So chose Astros. So do we agree with Mr. Gonzalez's conclusion? Yes, right? He also had said 36. So his conclusion is valid. So right here, either valid or invalid. We know it's valid because ours matches the 36. So we're going to go ahead and eliminate anything that says it's invalid because we got the same answer as Mr. Gonzalez. But now we have to look at the justification. Why? Why should we get 36? So is it because 1/3 of 120 is 36? So where did they get 1/3 from? And is 1/3 related to anything that we have in our problem? We have 30% for Astros. Is 30% the same as 1/3? No, it's not. 1/3 is 33.3%. It's not exactly 30%. So that one is not anything that we used or that we did with the numbers in our problem. Now let's look at letter D. Letter D says, Mr. Gonzalez's conclusion is valid because 30% of 120 is 36. That is what we did. We found 30% of 120 by using our percent box. And we put our 30% in there, and we put our 120, and we figured out that if 30% represents the part of the Astros, then the number out of 120 that's representing that would be 36. So the correct answer is D.